Friends, greetings. The echo of conversations continues from Trump with Putin to Trump with Zelensky. Because Trump says that we need to be friends with Russia. 11 time zones, the largest piece of land, the most valuable land. Moreover, they are even more extensive than China, according to Donald Trump, which is extremely unpleasant for Ukraine to hear. That is why President Zelensky specifically, demonstratively, mostazu, shows that we have other friends. He says, you know, Donny, if you don't want to be friends with us, you're friends with Putin, and we are friends with Macron. And specifically at the briefing, he says, look, Macron is calling, Macron calls me several times a day. He showed this to journalists in the office now. The media is spreading this news saying, look, Zelensky is communicating with Macron. It's not because he's trying to show off his level, that he has Macron in his phone book. No, it's to show Trump that we have other friends besides you. And if Trump says that we need to be friends with Russia, then Zelensky says that the Berlin Wall, meaning the division along the line of contact, is not an option. At that time, Trump's better friends say, and we say that the Ukrainian constitution needs to be changed. Shoigu says that the Ukrainian constitution hinders their occupation of Ukrainian territories because, firstly, it prohibits negotiations with them. Secondly, it prohibits giving away territories. So we see that the negotiations with Trump are very loud. The negotiations with Trump are very noisy, but the parties stand their ground. Ukraine does not want to give away territories, while Russia, apart from territories and political influence in Kiev, is not interested in anything else. Let's quickly analyze this, plus there is the position of the Europeans. So let's bring it all together. Let's discuss it. Subscribe from you. And thank you very much. Yesterday we collected for the third assault. Right now, I'm making the payment. So subscribe and we will begin with you. Shoigu said that to stop the fire, the Ukrainian constitution needs to be changed because it is precisely what prevents Ukraine's capitulation. You see, we have always disliked our constitution, and it turns out that it is also disliked and feared by our enemies. And he says that to start peace negotiations and end the war, the constitution of Ukraine must be changed. He says that there are prohibitions there on negotiations and on changing territorial integrity, and overall the constitution is problematic for Russia, and something needs to be done about it. And we see that it concerns them greatly. Article 2 of the Constitution of Ukraine, and in fact, those red lines that are embedded there, and Ukraine's statements that we will not go to make territorial concessions. This greatly angers Russia. It angers them so much that they will now complain to Trump. They will go to negotiations on the 23rd, which is very soon, and will demand territorial concessions. Overall, this night was very difficult and harsh. Ukraine had to respond regarding Engels. They struck Engels, there were FABs, planes, missiles, drones, and Ukraine was distributing part of their capabilities for a simple reason. The most massive attack on Kropivnitsky, 10 wounded, almost half of them children. Moreover, they fired more than 30 there. Shaheds flew to Kropivnitsky, some of which were visible, some of which were not shown. And in fact, Kropivnitsky suffered extremely heavily. It is clear that emergency medical assistance is being provided. All services are working there now, but the Russians simply chose a beautiful, decommunized regional center and started shelling it from all sides. This is the peaceful negotiations according to Trump. And Trump says, love Russia, the largest piece of land. The USA should be friends with them. They are bigger than China. He says that economic openness of the USA with Russia is not a goal or motive to separate Russia from China. This could be a consequence of these actions. It could be a consequence, but I think it's good. We should deal with Russia. They have the largest piece of land, bigger than China. The American president explains this by saying that Russia has 11 time zones. And what about you with them? Are you going to buy or exchange time zones? You can fly through 11 time zones from one side to the other. And you can go back. And they also have very valuable land. We heard a similar story about our land, but we see that it led to nothing. Trump mentioned that the US is making a deal with Ukraine regarding rare earth minerals. Even so, according to him, at least we can say that we got our money back and maybe do something about it. Well, so far no one has received any money because the deal hasn't been signed. But we see this super infatuation of Trump developing with Russia. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, speaking of territorial concessions, if they have 11 time zones, what more do they need? Good question. 80% of Ukrainians are against the withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine in 4 regions. At Putin's demand, 80%. This was announced today by the Razumkov Center. From February 28 to March 6, they conducted measurements, capturing the freshest data. Well, there are details about how many in each region, but the overall trend across the country is clear. And Zelensky says that we don't want a Berlin Wall, and he responded to this during the same briefing, talking about territories stopping the war, the line of contact, and generally sharing his thoughts. His impressions from the conversation with Trump. I want to emphasize very frankly, the issue of territories will be the most difficult. I feel it, we understand it, and it will be a challenge for all of us. And we will protect Ukraine as much as possible in these matters. But it will be very difficult for us, says Zelensky. If the war ends along the line of attrition, people will not return to these settlements where it will take place. There are regions, cities, and towns that are divided by one or another contact line. And if in some places you leave this line, you will simply abandon these towns because they are towns without life. No one will return to half of a city. If this happens with some large cities, it will be like Berlin, referring to the Berlin Wall, when the country and the city were split in half. According to the Ukrainian president, he said that this was also communicated to the US president. During the conversation, I honestly told Trump whether we want Berlin or we want many such cities. I think we understood each other that this was not an option. This is not an option, the president repeated, for a dramatic pause. I would not want the front to be frozen because several cities that are currently divided by the contact line would suffer. I know what a contact line is. In 2019, when I became president, I visited the eastern part of our country. I was in these villages. There was no life there, even in those villages that we controlled, says Zelensky. Well, it's clear what it shows. Trump, besides you, means the conversation was not very smooth. Well, I wrote and told you all about it yesterday. But we see that Zelensky demonstrates we have alternative friendships. We can be friends with Macron, not necessarily with you. We will rely on them. The big question is what will happen at the negotiations in Saudi Arabia, because these phone conversations did not achieve new results. Trump could not convince Putin. He still wants to consume Ukraine, and he could not force Zelensky to concede Ukrainian territories, which is good. Because if Trump were to give away Ukrainian territories, we would all very quickly find ourselves on the brink, in Transcarpathia. He will keep giving away, because Putin will keep increasing his ambitions. That's why Zelensky says we have an alternative. Macron calls every 15 minutes. I'll call you, that's it, we'll call. Well, and Macron himself? Meanwhile, Macron himself is preparing for a conflict with Trump over his ambitions to help Ukraine, says Bloomberg, and this exactly confirms what I am telling you. While Trump is looking for ways to reach an understanding with the Kremlin, Macron is strengthening European support for Kyiv. This situation has allowed French President Macron to once again take a leading position in world politics. After losing the parliamentary majority due to early elections last year, the French leader focused on domestic challenges. However, active international diplomacy now allows him to regain influence. On the eve of the European Union summit in Brussels, Macron is making efforts to consolidate European countries and support Ukraine. However, his initiative inevitably intensifies the confrontation with Trump, writes Bloomberg. According to the publication, the American president views the cessation of hostilities as a means to establish economic and political relations with Russia. During a phone conversation, Trump and Kremlin leader Putin discussed the possibility of halting the supply of Western weapons to Ukraine, which effectively jeopardizes Macron's efforts to boost support for Kyiv. One of the high-ranking EU officials says that European countries are not ready to agree to such terms. French government spokeswoman Sophie Primas noted that this demand is unrealistic and Macron himself is actively negotiating with Trump, and with Ukrainian President Zelensky seeking ways for further actions. Global challenges have brought Macron back. Influence, believes political scientist Melody McGrew from Paris University Science Po. The initiative promoted by France and Britain involves the deployment of European military resources, as well as money, military equipment. And now some European officials are saying possibly troops. Not necessarily as observers or peacekeepers, but as troops. They say, we are ready to help you if, for example, Russia advances further, and Trump is ready to pressure you to that minimum threshold. Then we will come to assist you. Yes, off the record they say this not only because we love you and want to help, but because we understand that we need to train our troops, as both the Lithuanians and Estonians understand, not without reason right now. The British prince is going to Estonia, understanding the height of the threat of a Russian attack. It's not just moral support. Before what? But clearly not before the May holidays and barbecues that Zelensky mentioned. So they understand. And they say we need to come to teach our own, so that they also understand. And we'll help you and we'll learn a little ourselves. There. Therefore, Macron is preparing for conflict. We are betting on Macron and alternative Trump political elites. And of course on the European Union. The question is, however, whether the European Union is enough. Because, on one hand, they say they want Ukraine's super fast accession to the EU, and then they say the year 2030. Friends, now I have 5 years. That's too much in this frustrating time. You see, too much in this frustrating time. Secondly, they write, a letter was quickly written by the Finns. Then all the Nordic countries, all the Baltics wrote a letter very quickly. We are accelerating Ukraine's accession. And at the same time, Spain, Italy, and a few other countries come out. And they say no to 40 billion, and it's not just 2 of them anymore. There are 5 or 6 countries. It has grown. Yesterday there were 2. Today it has increased by 3 more. They say no. We are against 40 billion. You see, so there's a bit of ambiguity. There is ambiguity, and this needs to be addressed. We understand that the French public is extremely excited when Macron returns to the global roles of world politics. There are sociological studies. There is IFOP. They have already measured it. The rating has increased like Macron. But our task is not to raise the ratings of Macron or Zelensky. Our task is to preserve the state. Our task is to protect the citizens, our settlements, to protect the future of Ukraine. So the fact that Macron is returning is good, but for us it should be a tool for achieving specific goals. We show Trump an alternative to ease his pressure ambitions on Ukraine. To say, Donald, we understand everything, but look, if it's not you, it will be someone else. It's not because we want to abandon him or stop being friends, but to demonstrate an alternative. Because the Russians say, change the constitution for us, recognize the occupation, give up 4 regions, withdraw from those territories we couldn't reach, and also give up the port in Odessa. And this is just the beginning. Then comes the second state federalization, the return of Yanukovych, Medvedchuk, and influence in Ukraine. Do you understand? That's why now we need to really dig ourselves out. Phone conversations, what I told you. Yesterday, today, I can only confirm 90% have not been revealed. But the fact that we are now betting on Macron, the Russians want a change in the constitution, means they talked about tough things. Attempts at capitulation and occupation of our territories. Therefore, it is clear that there will be additional activities now, and it is clear that it will carry on now. That's the information, friends, at this moment. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, and also write what your expectations are for the meeting on the 23rd between the Americans and the Russians. And secondly, is it really true? Says Trump. Well, is there any logic in what Trump says, that Russia is larger than China in terms of territory? so it is more valuable, stronger, and better. Is this really the case? Is Trump not mistaking to his wishes for reality? Please write in the comments. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. And I am extremely grateful for gathering, as I promised, at least 3 days. I am quieting down, keeping my mouth shut regarding the gatherings. And then we will return because we really need to help. And this time is used to earn and donate. Dear ones, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. See you soon.